Lots to unpack here. Lots to unpack. The iPhone SE in 2022. This is my full week review, and we're going to frame it, as you can see in the title of the video, against the iPhone 13 Pro. I understand spec for spec, stat for stat, it's not going to stand up to the 13 Pro, but when you just boil down to the experience of things that you're actually going to use and things that you actually do on your phone, it's a heck of a lot closer than you might think. And even though it's not a straight versus video, I am going to tell you a lot of the things that I noticed using the iPhone SE coming from the 13 Pro and what little there was that I actually missed using the iPhone SE for a week. And that's something that iPhone, maybe they don't have to address it, but it certainly is the difference between the way iPhone handles lower priced devices, even though it's still $429, and how Android manufacturers like Samsung approach their budget devices. A lot of times they'll give you certain specs that you'd want. Perhaps it's an OLED display, all the rest of it, but they completely nerf the experience, in my mind, by putting an underpowered chip in there, whether it's a Snapdragon 600 series, even if it's a 700 series or a 730 or whatever it happens to be. After a couple of years, and even sometimes, as a lot of people are saying with the A series for Samsung right now, the experience is not the same from an OS standpoint, just how smooth it is to do stuff. The performance is not anywhere near the same as the flagship tier device, and that's what you'd expect since the big price gap is there. Apple, on the other hand, uses the other method of reducing price. They'll give you this form factor with the LCD display at 750p. I understand a bunch of people cried about that, and the bezels and Touch ID and the smaller form factor and saying, oh, it's the iPhone 8, whatever, but their performance, because of what they put in here with the A15 and enough RAM, 4 gigs of RAM and all the rest of it, and the battery life, their performance and the experience is pretty darn close to what you'd get on the iPhone 13 Pro for day-to-day tasks. So it's pick which one you want. Do you want to be nerfed on the experience side, but have some creature comforts like higher refresh rate displays or OLED panels, all the rest of it? Or do you want to have a comparable experience to those people who have the iPhone 13 Pro? And to me, there's plenty of people that are going to prefer this, and rightfully so. If this came in a Plus version, I could see myself not getting a 14 Pro, and I understand why they don't do a Plus version, because it would absolutely cannibalize the sales of the higher end versions. Okay, so let's talk about it. Touch ID. Number one, I didn't realize how much I missed Touch ID, because you think, oh, Face ID is great. And yeah, it's reliable and it works really well on the 13 Pro. But when you get down to it and you start using Touch ID again, you realize that sometimes the future, well, it's nice and I understand and it's great to have this and all the rest of it. Sometimes the old reliable just is better. And you might say the grass is always greener or get off my lawn, whatever it happens to be. Touch ID has been an absolute pleasure to use this past week, whether it's opening banking apps, unlocking the phone, any sort of app authentication, anything that I needed in iOS. It's just been great. And for me, a lot of people have had luck with the Face ID with the mask. I personally couldn't get it to work right. So with the mask on and all the rest of it, being able to just touch your thumb there, have it be snappy and instant and get into the phone has been an absolute pleasure. And even if it's not, because they want to keep away from the bezels and all the rest of it, even if it's not a bottom kind of home button fingerprint sensor, they absolutely need to put something on the side of the next phones to bring Touch ID back, because it's been great and I miss it that much. Size and screen. I don't mind bezels. I've said it before, I say it again. I don't mind bezels. I use my iPhone 8 Plus for work. I don't mind the bezels there. The only time to me when bezels really comes into play is when they want to fit a wider display in the same footprint. So they want more display, but they want to keep it small so the feel in the hand is the same, and that's when bezels really hinder that, because in order to make the display bigger, you make the bezels bigger, which makes the phone overall bigger. If you have smaller hands or something, or whatever it is, or just not comfortable to hold once you put a case on it, I get it. That's why you'd hate bezels. But if you got the big, meaty hand, the robust hand, I don't really mind bezels. It's fine. You're not looking at the bezels, you're looking at the screen. And the good part about having bezel and extra area screen real estate around the screen, the LCD itself, is that it's squared off. So the content you're viewing in an aspect ratio that you're supposed to is not rounded off. You're not doing all kinds of things. You're getting the content in a nice square form factor, which is really great to see and use. Battery life up over close to 7 hours, which in a 2,000 milliamp hour battery is unheard of. That's also the performance and the efficiencies that you're paying for with the A15 that you don't get in budget devices usually. They have big batteries. They have 5,000 milliamp hour batteries to get you to that battery life usually on budget devices, but they're not the same experience. They're not the same performance to get you there. So you're getting flagship level performance above flagship level battery life in a price that's $429 with the Apple ecosystem, with all the rest of it, with the build quality. So when you start breaking it down, there absolutely is value to be had here. And if you just kind of dismiss it and just say, oh, geez, no, you know what, not really worth it, I'll tell you this. You want to stick with your budget device, your $300, $400 budget device. If my budget, based on all the problems and all the stuff that you could get with Snapdragon chips that aren't quite up to par when you start getting into budget, you can keep it. If my budget is $429 only, I'm getting one of these. Because the day-to-day experience is just that good when you're doing whatever. Let's see if we pull up some Pokemon here. But when you start using it, and Instagram and Twitter and the social media experience, which is unquestioned on iOS, which is fantastic. Facebook, just gaming, which, okay, is not the biggest display in the world, but the gaming performance is just like you would have on my iPhone 13 Pro. With the exception of the difference in the refresh rate of the screen and the OLED, I don't notice a difference in performance. And to think of that at a $700-800 less price point is really nuts. It's nuts. So you know what? If you got to accept an LCD, if that's the way they hinder and make it cheaper, and you got to accept the older form factor and all the rest of it, so what? So what? It's got to come from somewhere, right? There's not an infinite amount of things that you could put in a device at $429. So perhaps that's the sacrifice. Sound quality is good. Is it the iPhone 13 Pro speakers? No. But it's good. It doesn't distort when you turn it up. It doesn't get tinny. Good bass. All the rest of it from a device this small. Really nice. You get the wireless charge. You get the form factor. You get the build quality. Everything that you're going to want is here if you want a budget entry into the iOS ecosystem. And there's a lot of value to be had there, whether it's your apps, whether it's iMessage, with your friends, social media. As I said, is an unparalleled experience. Social media on Android is suffering right now. It has nothing to do with Google. It has nothing to do with anything else, any of the manufacturers. It just has to have the Twitter and whoever else doesn't put the effort into programming it for whatever reason. Every time they update it, it's a stuttery mess that they do into the iOS version. So if you're a big social media user, if you're concerned about performance, if budget range devices are not really for you because a year or two down the line, it's going to be a little bit laggy. It's going to stutter a little bit. It's not going to be as updated. You're only getting two iOS, usually two, maybe three versions of Android in a device of this price range. So I think that there's really isn't a competition there. This is going to be supported for at least 6, if not 7 years. You're going to enjoy it. You're going to not really notice a heck of a lot of difference. And like I said, if they made an iPhone SE Plus, I wouldn't even get the other iPhone. Yeah, the camera stuff is nice. Yeah, the OLED at 120 hertz is nice. But the iOS experience is so even across so many generations and specs of devices, it almost makes you question why you go for the bigger and the higher spec one a lot of times, even though there are clear advantages there. But when you can get that just feel and the utility out of a device for $429 and know that experience is going to be the same next year and the year after and the year after that and the year after that, if you're not somebody who changes their phone every year, if you're not an enthusiast, if you're someone who just wants to have this device and say, you know what, I don't want to think about this. I don't want to set foot in a store for another 4 years. You can absolutely do that. And at $429, I challenge you to find something, an equivalent, whether it's an iOS equivalent, because a lot of people say, well, just get an iPhone 11. I don't think so. It's not going to have the same support life. Yeah, it's nice. Yeah, you get a slightly better display, slightly bigger. You get the newer swipe up form factor, but there's value to going back to Touch ID. There absolutely is. The ease of use of getting into the system and just being able to pay for things and buy it, just really nice. Really nice. I wish I'm going to go back to my iPhone 13 Pro, but I really absolutely could survive with this and thrive with it and love it. And that certainly says a lot about this device in 2022, given the form factor and all the nerfing that Apple had to do to get it down to this price. If you've made it this far, like, comment, subscribe, all that fun stuff. You want to look like Steve Alicious? LongIslandWatch.com. Link in the description. New plant. Everybody welcome the new plant from Daiso. Until next time, have that Steve Alicious day.